You're lying in bed. The room is dark. Your partner is asleep next to you. Or maybe you're alone. And your body is still, but your mind has already left the room. You're not thinking about tomorrow. You're not replaying today. You're somewhere else entirely. You're imagining a conversation that hasn't happened, a version of your life that doesn't exist yet. A scenario where you finally said the thing you never say, or where someone finally noticed you, the way you've always wanted to be noticed. Why does my mind do this every single night? Why can't I just fall asleep? Like a normal person. Is something wrong with me? Am I avoiding something real by living somewhere fake? Here's the truth nobody tells you. You don't imagine these scenes because you're broken. You imagine them because somewhere, some part of your life isn't giving you what your nervous system is quietly starving for. You're not failing at sleep. You're not losing your mind. Every person who has ever lain awake, rehearsing a life that isn't theirs yet, has stood exactly where you're standing. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why your brain does this, what it's actually trying to protect you from, and how to finally feel safe enough in your real life. That your mind stops needing to escape into a fake one. Let's get into it. Most people believe daydreaming before sleep is just boredom, or an overactive imagination, or a bad habit they picked up somewhere. But the real truth is something much deeper. Your mind doesn't wander into fantasy at random. It wanders there because your nervous system is looking for something it didn't get during the day. Safety, closeness, being seen, mattering to someone. When real life feels emotionally flat or lonely or controlled by other people's expectations, your brain doesn't just sit there and accept it. It builds you a world where you finally get to feel powerful, chosen, or understood. This isn't weakness. This is your mind, trying to regulate an emotional need that's going unmet in your waking hours. What looks like a strange habit, imagining fake arguments, fake romances, fake apologies, fake reunions, is usually someone who has been quietly carrying unmet emotional needs for so long that their mind has learned to meet those needs itself in the only place left where nobody can interrupt, reject, or disappoint them. That place is the space right before sleep, when the outside world finally goes quiet and the inner world gets to speak. Most people think their nighttime fantasies are random noise. But your imagination, right before sleep, is one of the most honest parts of you, because it's the part of you that isn't performing for anyone. Here's the part no one talks about. The scenarios you imagine aren't random. They're a map of exactly what you're missing. If you keep imagining being defended, you're craving protection. If you keep imagining being chosen, you're craving to feel wanted. If you keep imagining finally saying the thing you never said, you're craving to be heard. Most people in relationships ignore this signal completely. They treat it as harmless escapism instead of as information. But your nervous system isn't being dramatic. It's been quietly registering. Nobody really sees me during the day, so let me give myself that feeling at night. Imagine someone who spends their evenings rehearsing the perfect comeback to a fight they never actually win out loud, versus someone who finally says, even shakily, "Hey, can we talk about something that's been bothering me?" to the person in front of them. One keeps the need alive in fantasy. The other finally feeds it in reality. And when you start listening to what your fantasies are pointing at, instead of just escaping into them, you stop feeling like a stranger to yourself, and you start feeling like someone who finally understands what they actually need. Here's what nobody explains. A lot of nighttime fantasy isn't really about romance or revenge or recognition. It's about loneliness, wearing a much prettier disguise. Most people assume loneliness only looks like being physically alone. But you can be lying right next to someone you love and still feel completely unseen. And that ache is exactly what pulls your mind into a scenario where someone finally notices you, the way you're aching to be noticed. Your brain isn't trying to replace your real relationship. It's trying to soothe a specific emotional hunger. The hunger to feel emotionally close to someone, not just physically near them. And when that hunger goes unspoken for long enough, the mind starts writing its own scripts, just to feel less alone for a few minutes before sleep takes over. Picture 2 nights. In one, she lies awake imagining a partner who finally asks, "How was your day?" really, and means it. In the other, she rolls over and actually says out loud, "I miss feeling close to you. Can we just talk for a minute?" The first soothes the ache for a moment. The second has the power to actually heal it. And when you bring that unspoken longing into the light instead of letting it live only in your head, that's the shift that turns a relationship that feels like 2 people existing in the same bed into one that feels like 2 people finally lying in it together. This is where it gets really interesting. A huge amount of pre-sleep fantasy is your mind rehearsing a version of you that finally feels emotionally safe enough to be fully yourself. Most people think these scenes are about other people, the partner, the ex, the stranger, the imagined apology. But really, they're about you. You're not just imagining a different person treating you better. You're imagining a version of yourself who finally isn't afraid, who finally speaks up, who finally isn't performing for approval. This happens because your attachment history has taught some part of you that being fully yourself out loud is risky. So your mind builds a safe rehearsal space at night where you get to practice being braver, more honest, or more wanted, without the real-world risk of rejection. Not louder confrontations, not perfectly worded speeches, not waiting for the ideal moment that never comes, but one quiet, real, slightly imperfect sentence said out loud to someone you love, even if your voice shakes a little while you say it. And here's what changes everything. Once you start practicing that honesty while you're awake, even in small doses, your mind stops needing to rehearse it at night, because it finally has somewhere real to put it. Here's the part most people never figure out. A lot of nighttime fantasy fills exactly the space where real emotional presence used to live. Before life got busy, before routines took over, before two people quietly stopped reaching for each other the way they used to. Most couples think drifting into separate routines is normal and harmless, just life getting busy. But the truth is, any emotional space that isn't filled with real connection gets filled with something else. And fantasy is one of the easiest things to fill it with, because it asks nothing of you and risks nothing in return. This isn't a sign your relationship is doomed, it's a sign that some part of you is still longing for closeness, and that longing hasn't gone anywhere. It's just quietly relocated into your imagination because real life stopped offering it an outlet. One version of this looks like lying awake, imagining a partner who finally initiates affection first. The other version looks like reaching over in the dark and simply resting a hand on theirs. No big conversation, just contact. Small, real, unspectacular, and far more powerful than anything imagined. And when presence comes back into the relationship, even in tiny 30-second moments, your mind doesn't need to manufacture closeness anymore, because it's finally getting to feel it for real. This isn't a checklist for falling asleep faster. It's an invitation to build a real life and a real relationship, honest enough, close enough, and safe enough, that your mind no longer needs somewhere fake to go at night. When you start feeding your nervous system the safety, presence, and honesty it's been quietly asking for in the dark, you stop reacting to loneliness by escaping it, and you start responding to it by actually closing the distance, one small, real moment at a time. The life you keep imagining at night stops feeling so necessary the moment you start building pieces of it while you're still awake.